"Get out of here right now! This place isn't for people like you!" The officer's voice thundered through the crowded emergency room lobby, his words slicing through the already heavy tension of the night. The sound silenced conversations, froze footsteps, and turned dozens of heads toward the brutal scene unfolding before their eyes. Before we dive into this emotional and unforgettable story, take a moment to smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. We want to see how far this story will travel, because tonight's story is one that will stir your heart, enrage your spirit, and remind you why justice always finds its way back. Now, let's begin. Angela Carter was exhausted. Her day had started before sunrise at the hospital across town, where she worked as a critical care nurse, one of the most respected in her unit. For 12 relentless hours, she had pushed through the chaos, lifting patients, inserting IVs, documenting charts, holding the hands of families who were losing loved ones, and coaching new interns who relied on her steady knowledge. Her back ached, her eyes burned, and the imprint of her stethoscope still pressed red against her skin. Yet when her phone buzzed with the devastating news that her younger brother had collapsed during basketball practice and was being rushed to St. Mary's General Hospital, Angela's exhaustion evaporated. She didn't think of herself. She thought only of him. Driving across town, she replayed every memory she had of her brother, his laughter echoing through the house when they were kids, his voice calling her "Big Sis" when he needed help with homework, his dreams of becoming the first in their family to earn a basketball scholarship. He was only 17. He had so much ahead of him, and now, the thought of him lying unconscious in a hospital bed clawed at her chest with every heartbeat. When she arrived at the ER, the scene was chaos. Families pressed together in the waiting room, some whispering prayers, others pacing anxiously. Nurses and orderlies moved in swift, coordinated bursts, their sneakers squeaking against the linoleum floors. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting the entire room in a harsh, unforgiving glow. Angela, still in her own scrubs, clutched her hospital ID badge and pushed toward the triage desk. Her voice trembled with urgency. She introduced herself, explained she was a nurse, and said her brother had been brought in only minutes ago. But before the receptionist could respond, a uniformed officer stepped into her path. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his jaw tight with authority, and his eyes cold and dismissive. He didn't ask questions. He didn't listen. Instead, his voice exploded like thunder. "Out now! You don't belong here!" The entire room stiffened. Angela froze, stunned by the ferocity of his tone. She raised her badge, trying to explain, but he didn't give her the chance. His hand gripped her arm, fingers digging into her skin, and with one violent pull, he dragged her toward the automatic doors. Patients gasped, mothers shielded their children's eyes, and whispers rippled through the waiting area. In her scrubs, in her badge, in her vulnerability, he saw none of it. He saw only her skin. The cold night air slapped Angela's face as she stumbled onto the pavement outside. Her heart pounded, her humiliation burned hot, but what hurt most was knowing her brother was inside, needing her, while she stood outside treated like an intruder. She pressed her hands against her chest to steady her breathing. She wanted to scream, to demand justice, but she knew the cost of raising her voice. Too often, Black women were silenced, labeled as angry, aggressive, or disruptive, simply for demanding basic respect. So she swallowed her fury, her body trembling in silence. Minutes crawled by. Inside, her brother lay unconscious, hooked to machines, his life hanging in the balance. Outside, Angela stood in the dark, her eyes fixed on the hospital doors, her soul aching with helplessness. But the arrogance of the officer was about to unravel, because the ER doctor who had rushed to stabilize her brother now came storming into the lobby, his voice carried like a whip. "Why is Nurse Carter outside?" The word slammed into the officer like a hammer. "Do you have any idea what you've done? She's the sister of the patient in Trauma Bay 2, and one of the finest critical care nurses in this city." The waiting family shifted, their stares piercing the officer's pride. A woman spoke up from the corner, her voice sharp with indignation. I saw her show her ID. She told you she was a nurse. You threw her out because you didn't want to believe her." Another man muttered under his breath, "Shameful." The officer's jaw tightened, but the weight of his mistake pressed down on him like lead. For the first time, his confidence cracked. The authority he wielded so carelessly was now turned against him, exposed in front of dozens of witnesses. The physician didn't wait for an apology. He shoved past the officer, yanked the doors open, and pulled Angela back inside. The entire waiting room watched as the woman who had been cast out returned with her head high. The officer, once commanding the room with his voice, now shrank into the corner, burning with silent regret. Angela's feet moved quickly down the hall, her eyes blurred with tears as she entered Trauma Bay 2. Her brother lay pale and still, wires and tubes connected to his small frame, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the ventilator. Angela's knees nearly buckled, but she steadied herself. She was not just his sister in that moment. She was his nurse. She checked his IV line, adjusted his blanket, and whispered words of encouragement in his ear, her voice steady even as her heart broke. Doctors and nurses respected her presence immediately. They saw not just a sister, but a colleague, someone whose knowledge and compassion had saved countless lives. Together, they worked as a team to stabilize him. Angela's hands, though trembling, remained precise and skillful. Her love and her training intertwined in every touch, every adjustment, every whispered prayer. And in the corner of the lobby, the officer's regret deepened. His arrogance, his prejudice, had been exposed not just as cruelty, but as ignorance. He had humiliated an innocent woman, disrespected a nurse who had devoted her life to healing, and, worst of all, tried to keep a sister from her brother's side in his most fragile hour. Angela didn't look back at him. She didn't need to. The truth had already crushed him. His badge, his uniform, his power, none of it could shield him from the reality that he had been wrong, dead wrong. The hospital buzzed on with its urgency, but the story of that night never faded from the people who witnessed it. Families who had once been strangers carried that memory home, retelling it to their loved ones, shaking their heads at the injustice and admiring the dignity of the woman who stood strong in the face of humiliation. Angela didn't seek revenge. She didn't demand his punishment. She didn't have to. His regret was punishment enough. Because sometimes the deepest regret doesn't come from consequences handed down by the system. It comes from realizing you tried to break someone who was unbreakable. If this touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on your notifications and drop a comment below telling us what you think should happen to that officer. And make sure to share this video so the world can witness Angela's strength. Because stories like this need to be told, and together, we'll make sure they're never forgotten.